video coming up this evening. Businessman Abubakar Jawara donates to some Gambians as Ramadan approaches. Our special guest on News Review today is human rights activist Madi Jobate. But first, we'll take a look at the newspapers. The Standard newspaper is reporting that the IEC to explain position on voter cards discovery, deportees, refugees outraged over police refusal to grant them a protest a permit, and palaver over ex-parliamentarians meeting at Musa Suso's house. Bill seeking 16 women in parliament has been validated. Let's take a look at some of these stories in detail. The Independent Electoral Commission has confirmed to the Standard newspaper that the electoral body has seen reports on social media of purported new blank voter cards allegedly found in Kanifing, but said he could not officially comment on the matter immediately. About 50 blank cards, strikingly similar to Gambian voter cards, were found by one Molamin Jikine at his Kanifing estate compound gate on Saturday. The cards bear the name and logo of the Independent Electoral Commission as the issuing authority, though they don't have any pictures, names, addresses, dates, or any other detail of a voter. The blank cards, though, have what looks like the signature of the IEC chairman, Mr. Aliu Momar Njai. A weekend meeting attended by former National Assembly members in the company of a bevy of beauty queens has sparked a hot political debate on social media. A number of videos and audios from the meeting contrasted as to the agenda of the meeting. While many perceived it to be a declaration by the former MPs to support President Barrow's political agenda, as alluded to by one of the speakers and echoed on the Barrow Media Empowerment platform, Mr. Suso and former Foni MP Musa Baje said the meeting was not a political. He was quoted as saying it was the maiden meeting of the Association of Former Parliamentarians, a newly formed group of ex-lawmakers. Baje noted in an audio he said is designed to clarify the matter. He said the idea of forming such a group has been conceived and the Sukuta meeting was to be the launch of the association, he added. The Office of the Inspector General of Police has denied permit to a group backed by the Gambia Refugees Association Europe branch to stage a peaceful protest against the deportation of Gambian migrants. Hundreds of Gambian migrants have been deported over the past 4 years, mainly from Germany under the Good Practice document signed by the Gambia government and the European Union to accept a deportation of Gambians from Germany. Overall, Germany intends to deport at least 4,000 Gambians whose asylum claims were rejected. In the German region of Baden-Württemberg alone, there are 15,000 registered Gambian asylum seekers, of whom at least 4,000 have been rejected. Bill seeking 16 women in parliamentary seats have been validated. A Constitution Amendment Bill 2021, which seeks to reserve 16 National Assembly seats for women, has been validated by the Civil Society Gender Platform and other stakeholders on Saturday. The validation workshop held at the Sir Dawda Kairaba Jawara International Conference Center and founded by the International Republican Institute and UNFPA was witnessed by numerous elected women and male leaders and civil society organizations. The perceived progressive bill has clauses that seek to increase the composition of the National Assembly to cater for reserved seats for women and persons living with disabilities, and also to seek to impose an obligation on all political parties to promote gender equality in the selection of candidates to contest parliamentary elections. Dozens arrested over bloody Gunjur border post attack. Police have arrested and are processing dozens of suspects, mainly from Gunjur, in connection with a bloody attack on 3 immigration officers posted at the border only a day earlier. The officers, apparently unarmed, were surprised by unknown people who raided their station on Thursday night. Immigration spokesman Superintendent Mamanding S. Diba said the attackers are believed to be about 10 or more people armed with single-barrel hunting guns, machetes, sticks, and house-breaking materials as they attacked the unarmed officers who they overwhelmed before running away. Activists urge government to address rising rape cases in the country. A respected women's rights activist and Director General of Future Enhance, Jainaba T. Sar, has urged the government to address the rising rape cases in the country. She particularly demanded an urgent investigation into the recent alleged rape incident in Busumbala that led to the death of one Marie Mending. Some of the things that we'll be discussing, of course, later on the show with human rights activist Madi Jabate. That's it for the Standard newspaper. Let's take a look at The Point. The Point newspaper is reporting Barrow emboldened Jammeh's enablers. I take it that's a piece from someone. UNDP remembers April 10th and 11 shows solidarity to the victims. Let's take a look at some of these stories. The president of the Gambia Center for Victims of Human Rights, Sheriff Kijera, has accused President Adama Barrow of enabling and gratifying former President Yahya Jammeh's enablers after Defense Minister Sheikh Omar Fai's comment in a press conference held at the Victims Center in Kololi. The center's leader said the Gambian leader has emboldened such people who assisted Jammeh in his human rights violations, citing the defense minister as an example. Kijera was quoted as saying Adama Barrow had emboldened and gratified Yahya Jammeh's enablers and perpetrators of the most gruesome crimes in the history of our great nation, he told reporters during a press conference. That will be it for the newspapers. We'll go for a break and we'll be right back. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Abubakar Jawara and his Gach group last Thursday put a smile on the faces of hundreds of Gambians when he gave them rice and other items. The event was held at the Gach group office at Fatima Plaza on the Battle Harden Highway. More in this report.
The businessman said he takes from his wealth and gives to Gambians for the sake of Allah only.
This is not our first time. We start this since we start to go abroad. I remember when I was in Angola, every Ramadan, I used to send money to my father, my late father, Alhaji Badji Jawara. He's the one who educated me how to do good things. I cannot talk, I cannot stand here if I don't appreciate him and my late mother, Alhaji Aja Fatukawa. I really want to make a special prayer for them. May Allah grant them Jannat al-Firdaus al-A'la. And then all what we are doing, we are doing for sake of Allah. We didn't do for any benefit or any propaganda. It's not about anything. We just used to do it. When I was in Angola, when I used to get monies, my father always told me that if you give more, Allah will give you more. If you give 1, Allah will give you 10. If you give 10, Allah will give you 100. If you give 100, Allah will give more than whatever you want. So, and I tested and I believe that. When I was young, I used to see my grandfather doing something what I'm doing now. But those days, no social media, no internet, no any communication, But Alhamdulillah, record is there. Whoever know my background, they will know that what I'm saying is really, and then is really happening.
Hundreds of Gambians are benefiting from the gesture through various institutions, associations or agencies. Bileji Tunkara is the National Assembly member for Kantora. He was at the event held at the Fatima Plaza on Batil Hadin Highway.
We are here gathered today. He feels it deep in himself that we are in COVID-19. We are still in COVID-19. As a result, families, vulnerable groups need some assistance. Out of the accumulated wealth he has acquired over the years, he wants to share the wealth with Gambians. This is part of what he has been doing in this country. This is not one of its kind. He has been doing these initiatives right from the former regime to this current regime and as a result, we are approaching the festive period. He deemed it fit to come out and assist the general public in a way of intervention of food program.
Dahaba also spoke at the event.
Tey waxkat yi Africa waxuñ Gambia ñooy wax ngir seen xol yu bon yi naan Aboubacar Jawara mi fi moo jëlee xaalisam bi suñ ko buggee xam ne ñëw ñu lijjanti ko Aboubacar Jawara bi moo dimbalee réewi Gambia wallahi la azil depuis jamonoy Jawara ba jamonoy Yaya Jammeh tey mu ñëw jamonoy Adama Barrow mu jàppale askan bi te yàlla daf ne jàppaleel ma doom Adama sutural ma doom Adama man yàlla ma sutural la te Aboubacar Jawara boo dee an naaj ci loolu la fen bañ na sernde ñi ñëpp taxaw fii lim nañ ko ne Aboubacar Jawara Greater Banjul area bi lim fi def is uncountable boo demee URR lim fa def is uncountable koo xam ne ak bu jot mu jàppale demkati Màkka yi serangal miskin yi dog fi bu mi gàcca yóbbu doom Adama yi Màkka kooku suñ ko waxut jërëjëf yàlla dina ko wax jërëjëf.
This woman was also full of praise for Mr. Jawara.
Aboubacar Jawara kita molti kabrimbalo na ngalo mina wolem nyinti coming ay Gambia laje amandulaje namanke ala bankoti nay do ko folo adomale na bole nay do ko folo Gambisara youth soul ay fengol dila bagasol dila mi yalonko because ni lafte la bankole ba folo la ni mina la wolon senea atata Gambisara mbota je tata sanyang ko la wulu bankoto mi yalonko wolon kombo sauti Aboubacar ye minke kombo south nsafole ko asiyata len tabe fulano jang because mo ni tata do ko la dulato inyanta min folo kela wala funding kel min bije anila VDC Aboubacar ye wolle dajale ayente aydan dur kumandi pour ngata sanyang anyanta min kele because aka kenyo bijele abe ibe muna fala minna ila banko nyin ay kenyo bije aka kodo dila every month akejo amma me fanan anata murunan koteke ako every month mbe kodo tala ngadi yalla pour alkala sate muna fawola pour alkala sate nyin dada jamengol be wo konole silol be wo konole musola gadinol be wo konole nyin Aboubacar Jawara atele woke.
Jawara donated 700 bags of rice, 150 cartons of tomato. Jawara used the occasion to also donate 6 motorbikes to Gambisara village and 2 motorbikes to people in the Combos. He also gave a car to Alhaji Bambo Lemd. Fatu Kamara reporting for the Fatu Network News Review.
Welcome back, viewers, and now I am joined by our special guest on News Review today, human rights activist Madi Jobate. Welcome to the Fatu Network once again, Mr. Jobate.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. Now, let's go back to April 10 and 11 events that took place in Gambia in the year 2000. These are 2 of the darkest days in the history of this country. Innocent students, unarmed, were murdered. And some, until this day, are left with injuries, life-threatening injuries, some disabled until this day. You know, in some other parts of the world, these 2 days will be a day when students, activists, will take to the streets demanding for justice for these people. On the contrary, it has been very quiet in the past 2 days in the Gambia. What happened?
Well, I guess probably it was disappointment. Bewilderment, especially on the part of advocates who are advocating for, justice and accountability, and for the to address the plight of the victims. Disappointment and bewilderment at the way and manner the Gambia government has handled this issue, because when you look at this issue, as you said now, it was not just the darkest days of the Gambia, but when you look at it, really, this is the most heinous crime committed in the Gambia, because you look at the source of the protest or demonstration on April 10, 11, 2000, and the response to it are all gruesome, because it's all emanating from the raping of a young girl and the beating to death of a young boy, for which Gambian students, school children, felt the responsibility to ensure justice and accountability. Only for the government, which bears primary responsibility to ensure that justice and accountability takes place, decided instead to, assault these young children, leading to the death of 14 more children. And then the maiming of many more, and as you said, some until today have been, physically disabled as a result of that experience. Such that when we get to this point, we get the regime out. No one actually even needs to call for justice and accountability. It should be a natural urge, a natural objective, a self-evident objective of any government in the Gambia, and each and every Gambian, particularly our elected and appointed public officials, to ensure that there is justice. But since 2017, there were marches for justice and accountability. Petitions were being delivered until last year or 2 years ago, when some of us said, if nothing has happened to address the plight of victims, we should not just protest, but we should practically occupy State House. But then we saw last year the government gave 15 million to TRRC to cater for victims. And here the victims are not just April 10 and 11, it's for all victims from 94 to 2017. So which means that's a very little amount of money, money that actually came from the sale of Jammeh's assets, which if Gambians could recall, the former Minister of Justice, was on the floor of the Parliament sometime last year or so to report to parliamentarians that the projected amount of money to come from those sales would be $1.4 billion. And I think they have collected almost that or close to that. And, so that money itself is one thing, because until today, the government is not reporting what has happened to that $1.4 billion. Where is the money? All right. But out of that, they took only 15 million to give to TRRC. And I understand at least two Gambian, victims of April 10 and 11 are benefiting from that money, having medical treatment in Turkey, But when you look at it by and large, the majority of the victims of April 10 and 11, not to mention the rest, are not catered for at all. But more equally important also is to address the legal, political, security issues surrounding that issue. So we know it is all because we had a government that was not prepared to protect, as its duty, the rights of Gambians. So they violated, they damaged the rights of Gambians, and then they used the law to protect the perpetrators.
Which brings us to the indemnity issue.
Exactly.
With everything that is going on with the TRRC, I know it's easy sometimes for people to say, well, we now leave it in the hands of the TRRC. Let's wait for their investigations. Let's wait for the recommendations that they are going to come out with. Where does this leave us with the issue of indemnity?
Yeah, so the TRRC process does not affect the indemnity. As a matter of fact, the TRRC comes within the broader framework of transitional justice. That is looking at the constitutional, the legal, the institutional framework that existed under the dictatorship, and how do we transform that so that we can really move this country to a democratic dispensation. So that will require setting up a TRRC, for example, setting up CRC to review the constitution, the Jammeh Commission, but it also requires legal reforms. And so one of those legal reforms, one of those laws that need to be looked at is the Indemnity Act, because the Indemnity Act is undemocratic, is unconstitutional, because it is protecting individuals who have committed crimes, crimes that to me constitute crimes against humanity, crimes, heinous crimes. And so it is protecting those individuals, and at the same time suppressing, denying protection and the rights in full of individuals who have become victims. So for me, the Indemnity Act should be one of the first laws that a new government would have said this law has to be repealed completely. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened, and it is 4 years now. We still have it, But not just that, even the Public Order Act, because the Public Order Act is the law that the state rely on to deny citizens to express themselves, to assemble and express themselves. And if they do, I mean, they use that law to arrest and, you know, even go beyond to shoot and kill. So that that law, as it is presently constituted, even though the Supreme Court had ruled sometime in 2018 that it is constitutional, I completely disagree with the Supreme Court that it is not constitutional. And in any case, it is not a democratic law, and it is against all human rights standards, whether it is in terms of the African continent or in terms of international human rights standards. So that by this time, and again, this is one of the laws that the Barrow government, when Barrow was a candidate in his manifesto, one of the laws they listed that they would change within 6 months of coming to power is the Public Order Act, because it is undemocratic, it limits popular participation, and therefore it undermines accountability of the state, of the government to the people. Because the right to freedom of assembly is one of the greatest tools citizens have to hold government to account. Yeah. So, but that law hasn't changed. All right. And then you look through our laws, whether it's the Criminal Code and other laws, whether it's the Information and Communications Act, you'll find provisions there, all of which are laws that or provisions that should have been removed, from our books completely, in order to transition this country from dictatorship to democracy. And so those things have not been done, and those things should have been done alongside the TRRC. Not to mention, consequently, the issue of institutional reforms, particularly security sector reforms. All right. So until today, the Police Act is not reformed. And when you look at the Police Act, it is going to tell you, for example, to deploy police officers like PIU officers, the issue, what kind of weapons do you issue them? And so the Police Act needs review such that it addresses those things in such a way that the police would be able to handle demonstrations, protests, without the possibility of violence, especially of police shooting protesters, for example, even where the protesters are violent. All right, and that would require, of course, building the capacity of the police to be able to know how to police public assemblies. All right, so the Police Act is not reviewed. The NIA Act is not reviewed. The Prisons Act is not reviewed. The Gambia Armed Forces Act is not reviewed. So, and all these are critical security institutions that engage with the public.
Which will take us to the actual person that is supposed to be championing this whole security sector reform. We have the April 10/11 incident, we have the death of Solo Sanding, and so many other things that happened in this country under former President Yahya Jammeh. And yet still, the defense minister came out to tell Gambians to suck it up and move on. What do you make of his statement?
Well, it's scandalous. It's insensitive, and for me, the moment he uttered that statement, all citizens should ensure that he resigns or the president, sack him, because that's a grossly irresponsible statement for any government to make. More so, a defense minister, and more so, someone who had worked in that dictatorship. Omar Faye gained only benefits under the dictatorship. He had no pain like the majority of Gambians, because he just enjoyed one position after another, even to the point of having been posted in the United States. I mean, a country of dreams where everybody wants to go. Imagine a public officer being given a position to go and live in the United States, where everybody wants to go. So that's the height of benefits of incentives that this man had enjoyed. So at least you have some morals, you have some values to be humble, to be honest, to realize that I did not receive any pain in this terrible regime that killed children who could have been my children. Solo Sandeng could have been him, could have been his brother or his, friend, but you did not face that. So at this point, when you have benefited to the fullest from the tyranny, and now we change to a new government where you should not have been appointed in the first place, Because Barrow should not have brought people like Omar Faye or Yankuba Sonko, or Mamburen Njai and Tangara, those people, key enablers back into the government. But you are there now, still benefiting from the blood and the sweat of Gambians. And still you have the audacity, the insensitivity, to speak in those terms. For me, really, I have absolutely no respect for any individual who could disrespect humanity, who could disrespect Gambians to the extent that Sir Omar Faye has done.
And of course, the Victim Center has also responded, and they are not going for Sir Omar, they are going straight for the man at the State House. They are accusing Barrow of actually being the person emboldening, the Jammeh enablers. What do you have to say about that?
No, I completely agree. I think what has happened is, what Barrow did, I'm not sure any Gambian has ever betrayed Gambians in this way in our history. Jammeh came and overthrew the PPP government and Jawara and accused them of corruption and flamboyant lifestyles and all of that, and said all the good things only for him to betray all the things that he said himself and became worse than what he removed. I may understand that, all right? But then for us to live through that regime, that tyranny for 22 years, for Barrow himself to be part of a political party that suffered the most, in that struggle to remove that dictatorship, and for all Gambians to rally behind him because of our pain, our blood that was shed and all of that, and to appoint him, to elect him as president, only for you to go back to bring back those same elements, enablers of the regime, it's a huge betrayal, honestly. And for me, it's beyond my imagination, for anyone to do that. The least Barrow could do, don't do anything, but don't bring us back any enabler. Right inside your cabinet, all across strategic positions in the civil service, in the security sector. Effectively, it means Barrow is basically telling us there's no point to remove Jammeh. That after all, Jammeh is good for the Gambia because I'm still using his, resources.
Yeah, but sometimes Gambians will argue and say, why not? They are still Gambians. So what's the matter with them? If they have the talent, why can't we appoint them to work for the country?
So yes, they are still Gambians, but no Gambian has a right to harm the Gambia. All right, and to be in public office, to be elected or appointed, is a privilege that all of us have. All right, it's our right to contest, to compress, and to vote. It's a privilege if you have voted or appointed in public service. Public service is a very sacred, noble people's institution. And so anyone who serves in public service, you have to be impeccable. You have to go by the law. You have to basically respect the rights and the dignity of Gambians, because that's what the Constitution says, that the government and all its organs derive their legitimacy and authority from the people, and they serve in our name for our welfare. So to be in public service is not a joke. Anybody who is in public service, you deserve the full respect of every Gambian, you deserve the full support of every Gambian, but at the same time, you are required to not to be corrupt, not to be abusive, not to be exploitative, and to be honest to Gambians. And if you are a public servant, elected or appointed, for once you are corrupt, you don't deserve to be in public service. So for me, I do not see why, say, Yahya Jammeh is a Gambian. I don't see why Yahya Jammeh should serve again in our public service, because he had this the greatest honor any citizen could have. The greatest honor you could have, I could have, is to be elected or appointed into public service. Because that means the people have chosen you out of 2 million to say, serve us. For me, even for one day, that is a huge honor. And so to damage that trust, that confidence that citizens have in you, you don't deserve to get back in there. So yes, we are all Gambians, but they aided and abetted a regime that was killing the rights of Gambians, that was killing the dignity of Gambians, that was violating the constitution of the Gambians, that was violating the sovereignty of Gambians. And so anyone who does that, anyone, for me, you don't deserve to be in public service again. That's my point.
And now we have people, you know, just rumors out there that there could be a possible coalition between the APRC, a party that Jammeh has headed for decades, and President Barrow's National People's Party. What would that mean to you?
But I think that would be a massive tragedy, you know, for, you know, Barrow. I mean, the idea or the suggestion that, I mean, this is even coming out, for me, is scandalous, really. You know, if anything, for me, not just Jammeh, but APRC has to be held to account, because this was a political party that was running the government and was fully in charge of the executive and the legislature. And so it has constitutional and legal obligations, you know, to protect the rights of Gambians, to safeguard the wealth of the Gambia, and to uphold the dignity and the sovereignty of Gambians and the Gambia. And under their tenure, we've seen blatant, deliberate actions, decisions to violate Gambians and the Gambia. And so, as a group, you know, as a legally registered entity, for me, they should be, the party should be held to account. That their tenure, their leadership, their control of the government, what has it been like? And so, you know, you hear people say, but how can you hold a political party to account? How can you? Yes, you can. And we've seen this around the world. You can. Entities, you know, that are legally registered can be sued. You know, because I'm not a lawyer, but I would say they are legal persons. And so a political party is a government. You know, it's either a government in power, that's why it's called a ruling party. If it is in the opposition, we say opposition party. And every political party's aim is to control the state power. So if a political party goes to control state power, how it manages that state power cannot be for free. You know, it has to be checked. And so when we get to this point, what we need to be thinking about is to hold that political party that, you know, held power to evaluate, to hold them accountable in the way they held and controlled, dispensed power when they were in charge. Yeah,
and some people will go as far as calling for their banning, the banning of the party. Do you share the same position with those people?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you know, again, you know, democracy is not for free. Ultimately, democracy, as we have, is based on the rights, the will of the people. And our government is our opinion through a democratic process, at which we go to elections. And so in a democratic society, all entities, individuals and all entities, whether they're political parties or businesses or, you know, whatever, they are supposed to uphold the Constitution. They are supposed to uphold, to defend, to protect the rights of citizens. So any entity, especially any legally registered entity in a democracy that, you know, has violated the Constitution, that has unleashed violence on citizens, destroyed the rights, the lives, the dignity of citizens, it is democratic that such organizations are identified and held accountable and be punished. And one of the punishments would be to proscribe, to ban those organizations. Because for me, that would constitute, I mean, a terrorist organization. And that was how APRC, as a government, ran the Gambia as a terrorist organization. I mean, the evidence of that is in the TRRC. How do we explain April 10 and 11? I mean, the government is not provoked in any way, you know, and citizens have a right to demand justice, to demand accountability. And the place they need to go to make that demand is to the government. And that government is required by law to protect those citizens to demonstrate, to express their grievance, to express their demands. So to unleash violence on them, for me, that's terrorism. And you know, all the other incidents that we've had at the TRRC, you know, to have a group called junglers, for example, picking Gambians anyhow and killing Gambians anyhow, anywhere, anytime, you know, with impunity, that's terrorism. So for me, I don't see why that entity should exist, you know, in the name of democracy, in a democratic civilized society.
So you think the APRC should absolutely be banned?
Oh, absolutely.
And just before I let you go, because I don't want this to be really long, people have to prepare for the fast and all of that tomorrow. But I just wanted to discuss one of the most tragic cases that happened in the Gambia recently, the raping of a very, very young girl in Busumbala. What do you make of this as a human rights activist? It must be worrying.
Yeah, extremely disturbing. Even as we try to understand that scenario. But these are two young people involved, a young girl and a young boy, all killed, and in this gruesome manner. So it brings a lot of things to light. It poses threat. It means every government is now at risk if such a thing can happen in our community. And myself as a father, having a young girl killed and his or her private part removed, I'm extremely worried and scared what could happen to my own daughter at home or in school. So especially when we look at, again, in terms of gender-based violence, the series, because gender-based violence is an epidemic in the society.
It is.
So it points to that insecurity, which is worrying. It points to gender-based violence, which is worrying. But again, as young people, the security safety of young people, because that boy also is a young person, all of these are issues that really worry and scare me, and which points to, therefore, what is the nature of our legal and policy environment to actually ensure that we obtain the necessary security. Not to mention we obtain that social and economic well-being that should contribute to ensuring greater security for our citizens. So I would want the police to do a very thorough investigation of this, but this is a matter for government to put on the table. I would have expected that the cabinet, that the National Assembly would summon an emergency session, the cabinet to summon an emergency session to really look at the meaning of this, so that we get to understand, because our approach to security is very poor. Recently, the police have done what they call Operation Zero Crime. Yeah. During Jammeh's days, we had Operation Bulldozer. We've had anti-crime unit. All right, but crime has always been high in this country. All right, but then when you look at it, is this the right approach to deal with crime in the society? If you talk about it just in terms of law enforcement, not to talk about it from the political, economic point of view. All right. So for me, now that we have a new IG, I would want him to have a rethink of law enforcement in this country. We need, and that security sector reform and police reforms particularly. So I'd want him to take a rethink. And for me to appreciate his approach, to stand with him, knowing that he is going on the right track, is when I see the IGP recognizing the role of the police station. You see, Sergeant, at the end of the day, the foundation of combating crime, the main weapon of combating crime from a law enforcement point of view, is to strengthen police stations, to build police stations in our communities, and then build the capacity of these police stations, because these police stations are in the communities. All right. That the first point of call, any one of us, when we are attacked, we don't run to the IG, we don't run to the president, we don't run to the National Assembly, we run to the nearest police station. But you go to the police station, we don't have a vehicle. There's no electricity, there's no paper. Even the number of officers there to attend to you, the capacity of those officers to deal with the various issues that are coming before them. And gender-based violence issues are there, burglary issues are there, all sorts of crimes are there. That capacity, each and every police station, the IG has to sit down to say, look, what is the standard for, what is the capacity for a standard police station? That is, a police station. How many officers should a standard police station? You can grade police stations into major and minor and one of the grade 1, grade 2, grade 3 police stations, all right? But what is the standard for grade 1 police stations in terms of personnel, in terms of equipment, say vehicles, in terms of computers, in terms of the police station itself? How many rooms should be in that police station? How many offices? The cells in that police station, what should be their size? How many people can we put in this particular cell? What about men and women and children that may be apprehended? You see, the police has to sit down to figure that out. So that when we do that, then you now talk about community policing. How do we build trust and confidence between the police and the community? The record keeping. I mean, today when I walk down to Serakunda Police and ask them, okay, we in 2021, January to December 2020, as a police station in Serakunda, how many cases of burglary have you received? How many cases of gender-based violence have you received? In Bundung, how many came from there? In Talinding, how many came from there, for example? And so on and so forth. Are they able to just sit at the computer and just hit and then the data comes out? See, that's all about management capacity. So are we organizing our police stations in that manner so that, such data is available? Because in the first place, they're collecting that kind of data. You see? So for me, the new IGP, if I have to advise him, I would say go back and look at the police station. That's your foundation. If you want to combat crime here successfully, look at the police station. All right? But operation this, operation that, anti-crime, because anti-crime is what you would normally call a SWAT force, like a special force.
Right.
Every police organization in the world, like military, they have special forces. Those forces, they don't go to any two people fighting at the club, you send those forces there. No. They don't send those forces to any burglary in a supermarket. No. Those are special forces trained with special weapons, with special skills, to deal with special crimes, certain types of crimes that, the police station doesn't have the capacity to deal with that. So you bring them to address those things. So we just don't need anti-crime unit, but we need, special units to deal with drugs, with gender-based violence. I know the police have a gender unit, but for example, that unit needs to be, every police station should have, say, a gender officer, all right, a gender unit at that unit. At that police station, so that every case of gender-based violence is coming to his or her desk, is taking the necessary data, putting it in the records, and pursuing it. Building capacity in terms of rape. How do you investigate rape that happened 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Do we have the capacity? So there are a lot of things that needs to be done. And all of this is to enhance the human rights. Because you see, Sergio, what folks don't understand, if you have a police, just like the military, that whose capacity is not built in terms of knowledge and skills and tools, the tendency for abuse of rights to take place is very high. So for example, if you have a CID, the police will have a CID, and this is criminal investigation. Certain crimes take place, it's a special unit. They need to have techniques in interrogation. They need to have, skills in understanding crime, even in understanding human psychology. They need to have knowledge in law, so that a crime takes place, they have this guy at the station interrogating this guy. If they don't have all of those skills, what they will resort to is violence. Because they don't have the capacity to interrogate someone to, through that interrogation until they get to the truth. So if you don't have that, what would you do? You slap the guy.
Yeah, it's now, the saddest part of this thing is that officers are being attacked in this country now. And I saw some of the comments on social media saying, where are the human rights activists? If this was the other way around, they'll be out here, jumping and asking for justice. But now that officers are being assaulted in this country, everyone is on deaf ears.
Yeah, when you hear those kind of comments, I don't know whether you feel sorry for individuals who say those things, or whether they are saying it out of ignorance or misunderstanding of things. In the first place, every person should be a human rights defender. Sometimes I'm like shocked. Why are you calling me a human rights activist? You should be a human rights activist. Your cameraman should be a human rights activist. The president should be a human rights defender. In fact, by law, the president is the chief human rights defender of the country. So everyone should be. But that aside, in his right mind would appreciate, support people attacking a police officer? So we don't, people get mixed up with things, right? A police officer, a teacher, a market woman, a taxi driver, an ordinary citizen on the road can be attacked by anybody. And the person who attacks that, whether that person is a police officer or just an ordinary citizen walking on the street or in his or her home, that person is a perpetrator, the attacker. And the purpose of law enforcement is to make sure I have the protection of my person, of my environment, of my property, of my life from attackers like that. But there's no, you know, who says police officers cannot be attacked? They would be attacked because they are human beings in this society. So what it means is we have just criminals in this society who would attack anybody. So to bring the agreement as between human rights defenders supporting, you know, the police arresting someone illegally or over there against a police officer being attacked, no. Police officers are supposed to protect rights. Even if they see me stab you, I mean, they are not supposed to slap me. They are not supposed to hit me. They are supposed to arrest me. And, you know, there's a time limit in the Constitution. It can detain me or take me to court or release me. So when we say the police, therefore, abide by the law, it's in the interest of all of us, including that police officer that has been attacked, you know, by that criminal. And suddenly, what has to happen is that criminal has to be arrested. But even if you arrest that criminal, we are still saying the police arresting him because the criminal, the attacker attacked a police officer, still subject that attacker to the rule of law. That is what is in our interest, all of us. So to bring the agreement in the way some people bring it, you can see these are individuals, I see them sometimes make those comments, but these are individuals who are hugely misinformed sometimes. Some, they just don't want to think about anything. They're just looking at probably, you know, they have a soft spot for the police, or they have some, I don't know, dislike for maybe a human rights, somebody so-called human rights defender or activist. They have a misunderstanding about human rights itself. So, I mean, they come with these kind of comments, and it's unfortunate, but you know, I would say that my reaction to it is that they are hugely misplaced. I mean, but I mean, it's a democracy also, freedom of expression. Right. So they are okay to express their opinion, you know.
But fighting for human rights still continues. Thank you very much for coming through to the FATU Network, Mr. Jabate.
Thank you.
That will be it for News Review today. Do join us tomorrow if you can. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.